Many people wonder what happens to us after we die. Will we continue living in another realm? Will we be rewarded? Will we be punished? For centuries, many people have believed that after death, a person is sent either to heaven or to a place of eternal punishment, depending on how they live their life. But is that what the Bible actually teaches? In this video, we'll examine one of the Bible's most well-known passages that is often used in discussions about hell, the illustration of the rich man and Lazarus found in Luke 16. Rather than beginning with assumptions, we'll look at the historical setting, the language Jesus used, and the context in which he spoke. But before we examine the illustration itself, we need to answer one important question. What is an illustration? An illustration is a story about a situation that never actually happened, told to teach an important moral or spiritual lesson. We use illustrations all the time today. For example, a parent might say, imagine two students take the same exam. One studies diligently, while the other spends all week playing games. Which one do you think will pass? The story isn't describing two real students. It's a simple illustration designed to teach the value of preparation. Jesus frequently taught in this way. Rather than simply stating facts, he used familiar situations to help his listeners understand deeper spiritual truths. As we examine the illustration of the rich man and Lazarus, we'll ask the same question we would ask of any illustration. What lesson was Jesus teaching? Before we examine the illustration of the rich man and Lazarus, let's first look at another illustration Jesus gave just 2 chapters earlier in Luke 14. Although the two accounts appear unrelated, the first provides an important key to understanding the second. Jesus often developed the same themes over several conversations. So let's begin in Luke 14. In Luke 14, Jesus attended a meal and noticed that the invited guests were carefully choosing the most prominent seats at the table. He responded by telling an illustration. He explained that rather than taking the place of honor, a guest should choose one of the lower places. Then, if the host wished to honor him, he could invite him to move to a better seat. Jesus concluded with the lesson. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. This illustration wasn't really about seating arrangements. It was about status. Among the Jews of Jesus' day, social position carried enormous importance. Status influenced where a person sat at a meal, how they were viewed within society, and even where they hoped to be buried after death. The desire for prominence was so deeply rooted that even the mother of 2 of Jesus' disciples approached him with a remarkable request. She asked that her sons be given the places of highest honor in his kingdom, one at his right hand and the other at his left. The other disciples became indignant because they, too, likely desired those positions of honor. This concern for status forms an important background to the illustration of the rich man and Lazarus, because as we'll soon see, the imagery Jesus uses is deeply connected with honor, position, and the dramatic reversal of both. Let's now turn to Luke chapter 16, beginning in verse 19.
There was a rich man who used to dress in purple and fine linen, enjoying himself day after day with magnificence. But a beggar named Lazarus used to be put at his gate, covered with ulcers, and desiring to be filled with the things dropping from the table of the rich man. Yes, even the dogs would come and lick his ulcers. Now in the course of time, the beggar died and was carried off by the angels to Abraham's side. Also, the rich man died and was buried.
In this illustration, Jesus introduces 2 very different men. One is wealthy, dressed in expensive purple garments, and enjoys a life of luxury. The other is a poor beggar named Lazarus, who lies outside the rich man's gate, hoping for nothing more than the scraps that fall from the rich man's table. Eventually, both men die. At this point, it's important to remember something about Jesus' audience. The Jews already believed that God would one day raise the dead. In one of the oldest books of the Bible, Job asks, "If a man dies, can he live again?" And the next verse answers this question. "You will call, and I will answer you. You will long for the work of your hands." Job's answer was one of hope. He looked forward to the day when God would remember him and call him back to life. The prophets had even been used by God to raise people from the dead, demonstrating that death was not beyond God's power. Later, When Jesus arrived at the tomb of his friend, Martha said, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." So Jesus wasn't introducing a completely new idea. He was drawing upon beliefs his audience already understood. Now let's continue reading the illustration.
And in the grave he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and he saw Abraham from afar and Lazarus by his side. So he called and said, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this blazing fire." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that you had your fill of good things in your lifetime, but Lazarus for his part received bad things. Now, however, he is being comforted here, but you are in anguish. And besides all these things, a great chasm has been fixed between us and you, so that those who want to go over from here to you cannot, neither may people cross over from there to us."
Now let's carefully examine what Jesus describes. The rich man sees Lazarus beside Abraham and immediately says, "Send Lazarus." Notice that, even after death, the rich man still views Lazarus as someone who should serve him. His attitude hadn't changed. He asked for Lazarus to come and wait on him. Then notice another detail. He asked for only a drop of water on the tip of a finger. Imagine someone trapped in a burning building. Would they ask for a single drop of water? Of course not. They would want buckets of water, a fire hose, an entire fire engine. One drop on the tongue would provide no relief whatsoever. That naturally leads us to ask, was Jesus really describing literal flames, or simply describing a man tormented by position and prestige? So was Jesus perhaps using vivid imagery to communicate a deep spiritual lesson? Now we'll think back to Luke chapter 14. Jesus had already been teaching about honor and position. Who sits in the place of honor? Who is exalted? Who is humbled? Those same ideas appear here. Lazarus is now described as being at Abraham's side. Abraham was regarded as the father of the Jewish nation. There was no greater place of honor imaginable. The beggar who once lay beneath the rich man's table has now been given the highest position imaginable, next to Abraham himself. The rich man, by contrast, is completely separated from that position. Abraham then says, "A great chasm has been fixed between us and you." To a first-century Jew, nearness and honor went hand in hand. The closer you were to someone revered, the greater your standing. The farther away you were, the lower your position. The rich man now finds himself as far removed from Abraham's favor as Lazarus once was from his own table. The positions have been completely reversed. The rich man longs to occupy the place now held by Lazarus, but that place is no longer available to him. Why? The answer may lie just a few verses earlier. Immediately before this illustration, Jesus taught, "No servant can be a slave to two masters. You cannot be slaves to God and to riches." That statement provides the immediate context. The rich man had chosen riches over God. Now the one whom society honored finds himself excluded from honor, while the one whom society despised is welcomed into the place of highest honor. So what lesson was Jesus teaching? Was he teaching about the geography of the afterlife? Or was he teaching that those who pursue status and riches instead of God may find themselves furthest from his favor, while the humble are exalted? Okay, you may say, this illustration makes complete sense now, but what about other instances in the Bible of hellfire? Well, before we go any further, we need to remember something very important. The meaning of words changes over time. For example, 100 years ago, the English word gay simply meant a happy or cheerful person. Today, that same word is commonly understood to mean something entirely different. The word itself hasn't changed. The meaning people attach to it has. The same thing can happen with Bible words. Over the centuries, the original meaning of certain Hebrew and Greek words has gradually become replaced by later ideas. One example is found in Matthew 5, verse 22. In the King James Version we read, "Whoever shall say, 'Thou fool,' shall be in danger of hell fire." For centuries, artists have imagined hell as a place of eternal fire and torment. But now let's look at the original Greek text. Notice the word translated hell. The Greek word is Gehenna. If we click on the Strong's definition, we find something very interesting. Bible Hub explains that Gehenna comes from the Hebrew expression meaning Valley of Hinnom. In other words, Gehenna wasn't originally the name of an invisible place of punishment. It was the name of a real valley just outside Jerusalem. This is thought to be Gehenna, a real place, a peaceful valley just south of Jerusalem, quite different from what many people picture when they hear the English word hell. So why did the Valley of Hinnom become associated with judgment? To answer that, we need to go back into the history of ancient Israel. The Valley of Hinnom had become infamous because some of the people of Judah had adopted pagan religious practices. Instead of worshiping the true God, they sacrificed their own sons and daughters by burning them in the fire. Through the prophet Jeremiah, God strongly condemned these practices. Jeremiah 7 verse 31 says, "They have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the Valley of Hinnom, in order to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, something that I had not commanded and that had never even come into my heart." Think about that statement. God doesn't simply say, "I never commanded this." He goes even further. He says it had never even come into his heart. Those are remarkable words. To a first-century Jew, Gehenna was a real valley just outside Jerusalem with a tragic history. Because it had become an accursed place, it was associated with disgrace, judgment, and destruction. It was also used as a place where refuse could be destroyed by fire. So when Jesus warned that someone could become liable to the fiery Gehenna, his audience would not have imagined an invisible place beneath the earth. They would have pictured this well-known valley and everything it represented, a place where that which was rejected was destroyed. The language is vivid and symbolic, drawing upon a real location that every Jew would have known. So what was the likely first-century understanding of Gehenna? It was a real valley outside Jerusalem, a place associated with disgrace and judgment because of its history, a place where garbage was destroyed by fire. And perhaps most importantly, Gehenna, the word commonly used in the King James Version and other Bibles to represent hellfire, was the very place where God declared that the burning of human beings was something that had never entered his heart. So what can we learn from all of this? First, God is not impressed by wealth, social standing, or human status. Throughout the scriptures, he consistently honors those who are humble and who love him. Second, the immediate context of the illustration is Jesus' warning in Luke 16, verse 13. You cannot be slaves to God and to riches. The rich man's problem was not that he possessed wealth. It was that his heart belonged to his riches rather than to God. Finally, when we examine the historical meaning of Gehenna, we discover that Jesus was using the name of a real place familiar to his audience. Understanding that historical setting helps us read his words in the context in which they were first spoken. I'll leave you with one final verse. Whoever does not love has not come to know God, because God is love. Whatever conclusions we reach about difficult passages of Scripture, they should always be consistent with the God whom the Bible reveals, a God whose very nature is love. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Scripture. I hope it has encouraged you to continue examining the Bible carefully, always considering its historical setting, its language, and above all, the character of the God who inspired it.